All right, we're good to go?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay. All right, so welcome everybody. Like I said before, this is the very first Vidcast podcast, call it the way, whatever you want, from Treated. Obviously, the first campaign we decided to go live with is about menopause, and we try to, kind of survey people and see what they're thinking and what they know or don't know about menopause. And today on the panel we have 2 doctors, 1 pharmacist, and 1 activist, campaigner, menopause.
I'll go with them all.
Yeah. So the first thing that we've asked people was, at what age do you think menopause starts? So we had a vast majority of people thinking that the menopause started between 46 and 55 years old, but another good chunk thinking 36 to 45. Obviously, we'll discard the others because I think they're like 5 and 7%, but still a bit of awareness need to be risen, I guess, with the people that thought it was way earlier or way later.
In the UK, the average age of menopause is considered 51, but it does vary quite a lot with racial backgrounds. So it's quite, ethnicity impacts on age, but usually it's between 45 and 55. I wonder whether some of the respondents who'd said somewhere between 18 and 35 might have been actually describing their own experience, because 1% of women do go through menopause under the age of 40. That's classed as premature ovarian insufficiency. And the people who've seen the survey may have been younger women who had gone through menopause, so they might have kind of been giving their own experience, possibly. And some women do go through a late menopause, actually. It's not unheard of over, sort of between 55 and 60. I would say 65 would be pretty late to go through menopause. So between 55 and 60, I have a small cohort of patients who are still having periods, but we'd be more concerned that any bleeding, which would imply that a woman hadn't become fully through the menopause, might be abnormal bleeding at that stage rather than normal bleeding. So we'd be worried only in terms of if they were still bleeding, we'd make sure that there were no other concerning symptoms.
Okay. You had nobody coming saying, I'm looking forward to get my menopause, why it's not coming?
Well,
Yeah.
I do, because some women in their mid to late 50s who are still having periods say to me, when are they going to end? I've had periods for so many decades, and I'm really looking forward to not having to have bleeding anymore. So sometimes you do get people looking forward to the period stopping.
Yeah, one of my friends, actually, she has not had any symptoms whatsoever, and she's really worried because she's like, well, is this normal? And especially because a lot of my friends of my age were all either having symptoms or were in the midst of the menopause, but she literally has not one symptom whatsoever. And she's actually a couple of years older than me. And she worries, because she always thinks, oh my gosh, is this right? Is this normal?
But a small proportion of women will never have, everyone thinks everyone's going to get symptoms, and somewhere between 10 and maybe even up to 20% of women just don't get symptoms.
And I've also had friends that have found out now that they've actually gone through the menopause but never had a single symptom, nothing whatsoever, really. And they've kind of sailed through it.
Lucky
Yeah,
women.
lucky, very lucky. I was one of those that just thought, menopause happens after you're 50 or, when you're older. You don't think it's going to happen, earlier. And I think it impacted me because I had lack of knowledge. I didn't know what the symptoms were and what I should be concerned about, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And it was probably that Annice really helped me to understand these symptoms and to realise it's just like another sort of, change in my life. And because I was surgically induced as well, when I had a hysterectomy, like all the symptoms kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like everything came at once. Whereas maybe some women that go through it naturally, you know, the changes kind of go on like maybe over the years, whereas for me, it hit me, and it you know, and it impacts everything, to your work life, to your home life, with your partner. I think it impacted everything for me.
What symptoms do you associate with menopause? So we gave people 18 options that they could tick. So yeah, the clear winners, let's say, were hot flushes, sleeping problems, and mood swings.
In our HRT consultations, we find those three are quite common offenders, if you like. And it makes sense because during the menopause, your estrogen levels drop, which brings on things like hot flushes. And that sort of ties in with the sleeping problems and the mood swings. So it makes sense to have those three as the most common symptoms. And it's good to see that the survey reflects what we see in practice as well.
It's what I went through, and you know, have suffered, and a lot of my friends have as well. I'd say that's quite spot on, really.
But that's a big impact, isn't it? Your sleeping problems, if you don't sleep well, that affects your whole day. And if you're not sleeping well every night, that's a real chore. And if you've got mood swings, you know, it's not just you, it's all the people around you that experience that, and their reactions to you, and you feeling sort of the change in you, and like you said, not me anymore.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
huge impact.
for me, sleep was the worst. And then you just can't function the next day, you know. And I think everyone just expects you to get up and you're going to be fine. But like I explained, you know, there was days I couldn't get out of bed. Lack of sleep is, it's not good.
So see, how long did it take you between getting those symptoms and seeking help?
I think initially, because I went to see my GP, and I didn't probably get the help that I actually needed at that point. She was saying it was probably down to lifestyle, you know, working away a lot, that I needed to kind of change lifestyle. And I think more than anything, she put it down to, you know, because I was getting headaches, and it could be migraines. So I just think for the first couple of, you know, months, not knowing what I was dealing with. And it was only till I actually found out when I had a blood test, and, you know, that my hormone levels, my estrogen was low, that I was obviously menopausal. So, yeah. Brain fog started for me when I was perimenopausal. I think that was the beginning of it, where I just thought, you know, I can't remember people's names. I've got this, like, loss of concentration. Even going into work, I can't retain any information. And having a meeting the following week and not remembering a thing that we've talked about. And that affected me massively, because, you know, you start thinking, you know, have I got dementia? Why can I not remember these things? And I think it is really important that we talk about this more, because I think I became anxious, because I'd sit in meetings or in my line of work. If I had to be in front of the camera, I can't remember my lines. And, you know, that anxiety makes you fearful. And then I'd become really sort of tense in certain situations, where I'd get, like, my heart would race. You get these heart palpitations. I really panic, you know. So I had a lot of brain fog.
It seems like in the UK, 2/3 of people were associating depression or mental health problem of any kind with menopause, and in Europe, in the US, that was a bit lower. So it's maybe more awareness, probably through you, Seema, that's going on. But is there a bit of a pathway between starting to, you know, not remembering things and actually panicking about it, and then actually leading to an actual depression? Is that something you both observed before? Or?
I think what Seema's describing is really what often women feel. You know, you it's a feeling of loss of control, because you can't remember, and it's in the middle of a busy phase of your life. And when it comes to low mood, progression to low mood and more severe mental health issues, we know that that's not necessarily the majority of women, but it can happen, and it tends to be associated with loss of physical health. So if a woman is getting worse and worse and worse in terms of symptoms, she doesn't know what the solutions are. And, you know, there may be other aspects of loss of physical health, there may be other mental health issues, then yes, menopause can be a trigger for that. I don't think we should be saying that menopause is a type of depression. You know, I think that is going a bit too far. I think that there are some women who will be more vulnerable to that because of, you know, their experience, the severity of their symptoms, what support they have, their other health issues. But I think many women do get symptoms of anxiety, overwhelm, irritability, mood being up and down, and, you know, palpitations that are associated. Because if you're not sleeping and, you know, you've got a challenging life, it can impact. So I think it's all about getting the right help at the right time and being empowered by understanding what is going on in your life, because it's less scary if you know what's going on.
Yeah.
If you don't know what's going on, those symptoms can be terrifying.
So we've asked, women don't tend to have sex during menopause. It was a yes, no. Any guesses? No? What do you think the ratio is? More than a third of people thought that basically menopause meant, you know, less sex, less libido. But the vast majority of people kind of knew. And the next question was, your sex drive is much lower after menopause, true or false? And yeah, almost 3/4 of the people thought that was true. Dr. Annice, is that actually true?
I don't know that it is, actually. In fact, so testosterone doesn't drop very significantly through the menopause transition, except particularly in the context of surgical menopause where the ovaries are removed, or if there are adrenal problems, or in the context of very complex health issues. So it's, again, I go back to saying it's a very individual thing. Multimorbidity, we call it, when people have lots of different other health issues, can also impact on interest in sex. And as Daniel said, you know, if you haven't got a partner, you're not gonna, and if you know, there's lots of different factors that can impact. So it's very individual. I mean, I am a doctor who asks people about sex all the time. That's my job, right? For the last 20, 30 years. So I hear all sorts of things. And I've seen many couples who are much older, post-menopausal women, and their partners not on hormones, who have a brilliant sex drive, you know, and sometimes I've seen patients who have then develop problems with their brain hormones, the pituitary gland, and so their ovaries are fine, but, you know, and they're postmenopausal, but then they've had problems with other health issues and said, oh, my sex drive's now been impacted, which could have been related to impact on the adrenal gland, and they're much older, and they've been having a fantastic sex. So it's very individual. Okay. And so I see many younger adults, men and women, who are struggling with their sex drive, and they're full of hormones. So it's a really difficult one to kind of say this is menopause is the cause, as the cause, rather than there's a whole host of factors that can impact.
And it's about whether patients are content with that or not. Some people don't feel like having sex and really want to feel like having sex, and there's others that don't feel like having sex and it's not a problem. I'm past that, I haven't got a partner, or whatever, lots of reasons. So it's about exploring, is it a problem for you that this is happening?
And we ask, what do you think can help? What can help with menopause symptoms? And our top 3 was taking HRT, talking to a doctor, and exercising more.
Exercising obviously helps with your energy levels and can help some symptoms of menopause as well. So I'm not surprised about that. And HRT, just from my job really, we get a lot of feedback from people saying HRT has really helped them, helped their symptoms, and, you know, they feel more themselves using HRT. And again, talking to doctors, if they've got the knowledge and they can give the correct advice, then I don't see why it wouldn't be helpful.
I speak to some friends now that'll say, you know, I've got these symptoms, but, you know, I'll be fine, I'll just work through them. And I'm like, no, you need to go and see your GP, go and speak to your doctor. And again, I don't know if it is that, you know, they're a bit shameful to go and talk about this. And again, it could be as well culturally, you know, in our community, my community, I think a lot of women, Asian women, are embarrassed to talk about it, you know, and it's just, like you said, you just got to get on with it. You're a woman, so shut up and deal with it. You'll be fine. But it isn't like that. So I try and push everyone to, like, you need to get the advice, the right advice, and then you know what you're dealing with. It is just another stage in our lives.
We should normalise it so much that actually we can talk about it as society, and therefore we have information, we know what to expect, and therefore when these things happen, we're not worried about them and becoming anxious because we know, right, this is something. And perhaps we shouldn't make HRT just the domain of GPs and doctors. Perhaps we should make the accessibility and availability wider through pharmacies, so that you don't just have to get that precious appointment that's not available for another 3 weeks.
True.
Because it might be that we should just make it more accessible.
I think that's a problem with the delay in women accessing support, actually, because on the one hand, women might be really struggling with symptoms, but on the other hand, they're getting these messages, it's normal, which it is a normal hormone phase of life, but it can be very disruptive when you've got when it's a busy midlife. And so they're sort of thinking, well, it's normal, but I'm really struggling, but I don't want to bother my doctor who's busy dealing with pandemic and vaccines and everything else. So it's really difficult. And I think we are talking about it more, and more women are talking about it. But it's, as you say, it's still, a lot of women don't want to bother their GP, or they just put up with symptoms and feel guilty about, having the symptoms almost, or embarrassed. And so I think it's changing, but it's not a quick change. It's like almost like a culture change. It takes time for women to understand and process that, yes, it's normal, but actually, if you need support, and you should be able to access it timely so that you don't get progression of low mood or, and that whatever that means to an individual woman will be different to others. And that's why talking to somebody if you're struggling is very important.
Yeah. One of the lowest picked one was talking to someone close to you, and vitamin and mineral supplements. People didn't really believe in it. The talking to someone close to you, I think I can get why people would think that it doesn't help with symptoms. If they've picked talk to a doctor, maybe that makes sense. But is that maybe how it starts, Seema? Like you first talk to like a friend or something because you're not sure, maybe?
Because I wasn't sure what my symptoms was, I was talking to my friend. I tried to talk to my husband, but he just didn't get it one bit. But for me, opening up to my friends then led to the conversation of, you need to go and see your GP, go and get help. So I think it is really important that we need to open a conversation with friends, be it your mum, your family.
During the menopause, like I said before, estrogen levels drop. Estrogen plays a big factor in bone health, and taking things like vitamin D and calcium can help prevent, bigger problems down the line like osteoporosis. You've got things like magnesium that can help with sleep, that studies have shown. We've got things like vitamin B6, B12 to help with low energy, fatigue, that kind of thing. But I think 46% is quite low. I would have expected it a little higher, to be honest. But maybe that's down to people not associating that you can take vitamins alongside HRT or, whilst you're going through the menopause.
And you were saying earlier about diet being important. Actually, what we put into our bodies is important. It can make the difference between feeling better and not. It might not address all of menopause problems, but it might be helpful.
Yeah.
The other thing is that a lot of women in midlife and going through menopause who are struggling with weight gain, which we discussed can occur for lots of reasons, are calorie restricting. So if you're calorie restricting and you're not getting all the nutrients from your diet, which you won't be if you're restricting, then the supplements are very important to get those essential micronutrients, because you can only get those from food sources or supplements.
Basically, we saw a big gap between the UK and let's say the rest of the world, where in the UK, like a vast majority of people were saying HRTs definitely help. And in Europe and in the US, it was a 50-50 thing, even less than that in the US. And that is because I think 20 years ago in the US and Canada, there was some high-profile stories associating HRTs to breast cancer.
That's true, and those studies were sort of deconstructed. There was more than one. There was one in the UK called the Million Women Study, which was slightly differently conducted, and they both produced this association of HRT with breast cancer. But it was, those studies were conducted in postmenopausal women started on HRT after the age of 50, many of them after 60 and even in their 70s. So it wasn't really looking at women who need HRT for going into menopause here and now, who are younger cohorts. And I could talk a long time about it, but essentially we understood the flaws in those studies over the subsequent 10 years or so. And by 2015, the UK NICE guidelines said, HRT should be being given to women who need it. And in a way, I think the UK has led the world on further information about benefits and risks and the sort of over-exaggeration of risk with HRT. And since the pandemic, because obviously this is a recent survey, since the pandemic, there have been a lot of influencers talking about menopause and HRT on social media, and that has really come predominantly from the UK. So I think the rise in use of HRT we are leading in the UK. It's not happening as much in the United States or in Europe, so that doesn't surprise me.
And those studies have definitely influenced the way women think about HRT. But I agree with Annice. Things are changing. There's more research to show actually that the women that need HRT can really benefit from it and can benefit from it safely. And there are safer forms of HRT than others, and we should, as doctors, be steering people towards the safer forms and encouraging them to be used more. But again, even the ones that perhaps are less safe, if they're the most convenient and they're going to make you feel better and exercise more and eat better and sleep better, then you're piling up the benefit of HRT, which you compare against these risks, which are very small. They're there, but they're small.
Yeah.
There are some women who have got higher risks with HRT, and the main contraindication relates to women who've had an estrogen-driven cancer. So women who've had a cancer driven by estrogen are advised not to take HRT, or if they are going to consider it, it should be discussed with their cancer team. And for those women, there are alternative treatments. So we should be inclusive. We should be thinking about all women, not just women who can take HRT, but also those women who can't. So there are options for those women as well.
I'm not sure what's available in the other countries, but I know that in the UK we've got loads of different forms of HRT. We've got gels, we've got sprays, we've got patches, tablets, pessaries. We've got a whole range of things to help, really, and it's just tailored to each individual. And if you can help someone in a certain way, like wearing patches, for example, it takes away from the inconvenience of taking tablets every day. I think that is beneficial to the patients as well.
So the next question we've asked was, do you feel you have enough support around you to understand and manage menopause? We had a good percentage of yes, which is 65%. Bear in mind, most of our respondents were from the UK. We'll break it down to countries after. But I think for me, what's still, I wouldn't say worrying, but what still needs to be addressed is, yes, there is 65% of women feeling like they have enough support, but it's still more than a third that feels like they don't.
To be honest, most of my friends and women that I know that are going through it have the right support. And I probably would say the women that don't, maybe because, again, it's that whole taboo subject, or, maybe culturally it's not something that, they're open to talk about. But I have to say, I do think because there is more awareness and we are speaking more about it, it is getting better, so...
But when you see 35%, do you feel a bit like there's some work left, or...?
Yeah, obviously it is. From that survey, you can see that. So, we've still got to, push, women to feel that they can speak about this, open up, talk about it.
And these are 1,500 women who either follow a menopause campaigner or are accessing a site which is promoting a menopause campaign at the moment. So what about all the women who
don't
aren't
have
in that category.
access.
Yeah.
I
There
actually think
probably
that's
will
a
be
very
much.
skewed statistic, and I think the no is much higher if you look at women outside of motivated women who are on social media.
Do you feel like you can talk to your partner about menopause? And we had the same thing, very similar results.
I could speak to my husband, my partner, about it, but I live in a household full of men, and they were literally, I think the word sympathetic, I just wanted them to sympathise with what I was going through. And again, my husband will say, if he was here right now, is, you know, him also having the lack of knowledge and understanding what I was going through. I mean, he went for dinner with his friend the other night, and his friend said, oh, you know, I don't know what's wrong with my wife. She's so moody. She seems really down. And Sandeep was like, oh, she might be menopausal. She might be having these symptoms. So I think it's...
Pat on the back, Sandy.
Yeah, I was very... But what I mean to say is, it is important that women should open up. But then it is, I get also, it can be hard because... You know, my husband and boys just thought it was quite funny to, you know, oh, you know, Mum, it's mind over matter, just get over it, you'll be fine, you know, but you're not fine. And I think it was only till I took Sandeep with me to the doctor, so I wanted him to understand. I think it's important they understand what we're going through. And I really made a point of educating my boys. So for their future partners or wives or whatever, they have an understanding.
Stereotypical assumption that men may be a bit, well, you just need to pull yourself together. And that's the one thing you can't do when you're menopausal, is just pull yourself together, because it's not that simple. And maybe women feel like they can't talk to their partners because they feel like they're going to get that sort of response. But there's certainly some education to be done amongst partners so that... we're approachable and educated and aware and know what to expect and know what to look out for. But as GPs, you know, there are so many GPs who don't feel confident in prescribing and probably give this, oh, it's not for you. And maybe it's about our own knowledge and awareness and thinking, actually, I need to be updated on these studies. Instead of scared by them, find out the detail, work out which HRT is safe, which is not.
Do you feel like it's socially acceptable to openly discuss menopause? Once again, very, very similar results.
Yeah, that saddens me to think that 36% can't speak. But then again, it could be, you know, the whole... I don't know, I think it goes back to like years ago, you know, it was a very sort of hush conversation, you know, you're not supposed to speak about it. But really, I think... You know, times have changed. We have to talk about these things. And maybe it's just that shame around, you know, the opening up about the conversation.
In Europe, and especially in Germany, women really didn't feel like the vast majority in Germany and a good chunk in Europe said that it was not a socially acceptable topic.
We've done a lot of breaking that taboo in the UK, and lots of amazing women have been talking about menopause, and so it's become, it's not so much a taboo topic in the UK.
It's like more acceptable,
younger women are saying, look, actually, they're not old and shriveled up. They're absolutely amazing. You know, it's not that bad. In fact, it's not a bad thing to talk about. And in fact, talking about it improves, you know, the whole experience. I don't think we have that in Europe, and it's not there in America. It's probably not, actually. It's probably... America's probably closer to the UK because people like Oprah have started talking about it.
Yeah.
But
and you can
actually,
see it,
Europe, I think, minimal. And I don't think Europe looks at what's going on so much on UK media and social media
less
either.
And less now.
So I think it's breaking the taboo that's important.
Yeah.
We might have historic stereotypes in Europe saying we don't talk about menopause, it's associated with being old. But it isn't. It's just that's just an incorrect perception and a taboo. So we've broken it down better in the UK, and we still need to do more work, but the rest of Europe needs to do even more work. So
we asked, do you think menopause should be recognized as a condition that can affect our attendance at work? And that's an overwhelming yes.
It's really complicated. I write about this in my book. I've got a chapter of this in my book, in that if you make menopause into a protected characteristic and you tell employers these women are ill, they're going to have mental health issues, that they're not capable of working, those employers, the big employers, are going to have to, basically wrap women in cotton wool, and essentially, or at least that's what they think they're going to have to do. It's going to put big employers off employing midlife women. Whether we like it or not, it will happen. And so we have to be very careful, because for most women need modest, if any, reasonable adjustments in the workplace. They don't need to be off sick for 5 years or 10 years. It's modest, reasonable adjustments, and actually small adjustments, provision for working from home or having extension for deadlines if they've got, a particular problem. Most women need small adjustments, and it's different for everyone. It's absolutely different for everyone. So I think if we make a diktat that menopause is some sort of disorder that we have to, consider like serious disease, it's going to potentially negatively affect women in the workplace. And I want to keep midlife women in the workplace, because we need equality and leadership in our world. We need women in the boardrooms making decisions, because women have a lot of different things to bring to the table than men. Whereas at the moment, women are tending to leave the workplace. All senior leadership roles tend to be 90% men, if you look across the globe. And if we start making menopause into an illness that companies have to, jump through lots of hoops to employ midlife and menopausal women, it could be a disservice to women. So I don't have all the answers, but I think it needs to be considered very, very carefully to make sure that we're not discriminating essentially against women ultimately.
I kind of agree with you, because listen, I've gone through it, and it's not that I need a day off. What I need is just the support of my team, understanding, be it I've been in a meeting where I can't remember things, just for them to understand where I'm at. I don't want to go home. I don't want to lie in bed and feel sorry for myself. I just want people to understand. So in my workplace, I made it a thing just to educate my team, because a lot of, the younger team didn't understand what it was, and just to let them know that, Seema might have an off day, or I might just have a moment where I've just got to walk out, I might be having a hot flush. It's just having that support. I don't want to be, sort of labelled as, I need to have, a day off because it's an illness, because it really isn't. It's just another stage, So for me, it's having that support in the workplace and your, team members, everyone understanding.
I think the culture in larger organisations needs to change. And I think actually, if a woman does feel that when she has a block in a presentation, in a big meeting at work, in the boardroom or wherever it is, and she has to sort of leave, that she's not being laughed at afterwards. It's sort of like, are you okay? And, take some time out and come back in again.
Any other things, Seema? Maybe have the last words on not necessarily on the topic, unless you had something to say on that topic.
No, just in general, let's keep talking. I still think there's work to be done. When we've not just cracked it in the UK, and obviously in the other countries there's a lot more to be done, but I just think we've got to keep going, keep talking.
Cool. That's it. That's a wrap.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Good. And you've kept it under the 2 hours as well.
Yeah. That was good.
Good.